E3 is one of the biggest gaming events of the year. Devs from all over the world come to this event to show off their new trailers, live gameplay, streaming the game, and all sorts of other promotional content telling you about what they're working on, what they're doing. And to be honest, it can be very difficult to keep track of it all. And that's why today's video, I've condensed a lot of that really important highlight information into a nice 10-minute segment so you don't have to go digging through all those news sites. Now, without question, Cyberpunk 2077 probably created the most waves of E3. Last year, we actually got our first proper look at the game. The devs released both a proper reveal trailer and massive 48-minute gameplay reveal. This year, we got a new trailer and finally the release date. Cyberpunk 2077 launches for all platforms on April 16th, 2020. They did a behind closed doors demo once again at this year's E3 and will be releasing an updated gameplay trailer based on the demo at PAX West on August 30th. The big revelation of this year's trailer, however, is the inclusion of Keanu Reeves as Johnny Silverhand. He will be a featured character in Cyberpunk and has the second most amount of dialogue in the game behind the main character. This is like getting your ice cream with the cherry on top, except instead of a cherry on top, it's like another scoop of ice cream. And what I think is so cool about this is that Keanu Reeves has actually got a pretty big history in cyberpunk genre. Obviously, he's done The Matrix, which is a big famous movie, and there's a bunch of other cool little films like A Scanner Darkly and whatnot, but there's also a movie from 1995 called Johnny Mnemonic, which I think is probably the most cyberpunk movie ever made. It's just pure cyberpunk, as cyberpunky as the game itself, and I just think it's awesome to see him just dominating this genre. Now, of course, if you're not familiar with Cyberpunk 2077, it's set in the fictional dystopian Night City. It's an open-world, single-player RPG game that gives players a plethora of skills, weapons, and abilities to choose from. Then, of course, we have Doom Eternal, the game with the giant billboard on the front of the Los Angeles Convention Center, which is where E3 is hosted. The game is bringing Earth, Heaven, and Hell together in one glorious joyride of demonic destruction, the sequel to the 2016 Doom, which essentially rebooted the entire franchise and won just about every Game of the Year award. The sequel is going to launch on November 22nd for all platforms. The E3 story demo shows a ton of new gameplay elements like a grappling hook, shoulder-mounted weapon, an updated plasma rifle that looks like the classic one from the original Doom, environmental hazards, and more. Players will fight from Mars to Earth to Heaven and Hell. Bethesda's E3 presentation included several gameplay clips, including the game's updated multiplayer system. Called Battle Mode, it pits two demon players against one Doomslayer. The original gameplay reveal for Doom Eternal had something similar called Invasions. Essentially, players can choose to invade someone else's campaign as a demon in a 2v1 fight. Battle Mode looks like it's taking Invasions and making it a dedicated multiplayer mode as well. Halo Infinite is set to be a launch title for the next generation Xbox console. Currently called Project Scarlet, both Infinite and Scarlet will launch during the holiday season 2020. The Scarlet will support up to 8K resolutions, up to 120 FPS output, ray tracing, and has allegedly no load times because of its next-gen SSD technology. The new trailer for Infinite was a little bit closed off, but it did seemingly show a pretty decent jump in the game's visuals with much more detail and well-animated character faces than past titles. It's set after the events of Halo 5 and shows one of the Halo rings has been severely damaged. Master Chief returns with an updated armor design, reflecting a shift in design back to the original game's aesthetics. In a first for the series, Infinite will launch on Xbox and PC at the same time. The marketing for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is quickly ramping up. The first proper trailer for the game, which was originally announced at last year's E3, dropped 2 months ago, but it showed mostly cinematics and very little gameplay. This E3, they released a full gameplay trailer, and unlike many of the previous Star Wars games, swinging your lightsaber with reckless abandon doesn't seem to be the way to go for the Fallen Order, using abilities like freeze time to slow down enemies and their weapons, combining with more advanced and civilized combat systems that will make use of parrying and properly timed dodges, gives Fallen Order a bit more gameplay depth. Some enemies can even resist or outright block your abilities and attacks. Fallen Order launches on November 15th for all platforms. Nintendo announced a direct sequel to 2017's Zelda Breath of the Wild. The follow-up looks like it's ramping up Wild's darker elements to 11. It runs on the same engine as Wild as well, so unlike past Zelda titles, it won't be a dramatic departure visually from a previous game. Nintendo are also releasing a remaster of Link's Awakening, the fourth title in the franchise and the first handheld Zelda game, which initially released in 1993 for the Game Boy. Breath of the Wild sequel has no release date yet, but Link's Awakening is scheduled to launch this year on the Switch. An updated version of Nintendo's portable console hybrid has been rumored for months now, but they didn't announce anything official at E3. Dark Souls developer From Software is making a game in collaboration with Game of Thrones writer George R.R. Martin called Elden Ring. It's an open-world dark fantasy game. Players will fight through various kingdoms to defeat each region's ruler. Doing so will grant you their powers. Martin contributed to the game's mythology, fleshing out side characters, the game's lore, and more. Its director, Hidetaka Miyazaki, wrote the main story. He previously worked on Dark Souls 1 and 3, as well as the publisher's most recent title, Sekiro. In typical From Software fashion, the reveal trailer doesn't give much away, but it does look pretty. Watch Dogs Legion takes the franchise hack everything motto to the next level and lets you recruit NPCs. In fact, the game has no one main character. Instead, you build a roster of up to 20 civilians to play as, each with their own unique backstory, abilities, skills, and dialogue. Along the way, you'll run into traditional NPCs that give you missions and progress the story along, but your playable characters will always be totally unique. If one of your controlled NPCs dies, they're actually gone forever. You continue the game with another one from your roster and can release or recruit NPCs as you play. To recruit an NPC, you'll need to do a series of missions that convinces them to join you. It's an interesting take on the game's premise and relatively unique even by today's standards. Legion releases March 6, 2020 on all platforms. Also, it's in London, so a new setting. Rainbow Six Quarantine is the upcoming 3-player co-op zombie game based on Rainbow Six Siege. Last year, Siege had a limited time event called Outbreak. Like Quarantine, it was also a 3-player co-op mode that featured gameplay in a similar vein to Left 4 Dead. Players would fight their way through interconnected areas, completing objectives along the way. While it wasn't particularly popular with the core Siege audience, it proved to be something people clearly wanted more of. Quarantine looks like a full-blown expansion of Outbreak into a proper game. It will also feature several operators like in Siege. Ella and Vigil were spotted in the Quarantine trailer, so expect to see some familiar faces. Quarantine is currently scheduled for an early 2020 release. Minecraft. I know, you guys have been waiting to hear more Minecraft news. I apologize for the drought of Minecraft updates lately. We're finally getting 8K, guys. We've been wanting it for a long time. It's coming. No, I'm just kidding about the AK thing. That's a joke. But Minecraft is getting a standalone game called Minecraft Dungeons that looks like a take on the classic Diablo action RPG genre. It's set to launch in spring 2020 on all platforms. It features an isometric perspective and can be played solo or with up to 4 players in both local and online co-op. Players will fight new mobs, level up by finding unique items and weapon enchantments, and choose from a variety of playstyles including melee and ranged attacks. The dungeons will be procedurally generated as well, similar to Diablo, so expect no 2 runs to be totally identical. And if I'm being totally honest here, I gotta say it kind of looks cool. I'm a Diablo fanboy, and anything that comes out that looks similar to Diablo, I'm somewhat interested in, and this could actually be a huge game for the Minecraft fan base. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is shaping up to be a lot more than just a direct upgrade of the original game. It was recently revealed that the remake would be episodic, with each release focusing on a specific part of the original game. The first episode is Midgar, the steampunk-inspired city you spent so much of the original game's first act in. In addition to being a massive visual overhaul, the remake updates the game's combat to the more modern, real-time style of the more recent Final Fantasy games. Episode 1 launches in March 2020. Finally, Square Enix gave us our first look at their upcoming Marvel's Avengers game. It's a single-player and four-player co-op game that throws you into the shoes of popular Marvel heroes like the Hulk, Iron Man, and Thor. That said, it's not a direct tie-in with the current Marvel Cinematic Universe. The heroes are all voiced by different people and don't really resemble the actors from the movies. The game tells its own original story that isn't connected to the films. The trailer doesn't offer any proper gameplay, but still looks pretty promising. If the gameplay is anything like what the trailer showcases, it's sure to be a pretty exciting game. And that wraps it up for our E3 highlight video. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode of This Week in Gaming for even more game news in E3 and outside of E3 as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.